Hi, I'm Adam. I'm a program manager on the Xbox Gaming Accessibility team. I'm a certified assistive technology professional and I've worked with a lot of gamers with disabilities to figure out the best gaming setup that works for them.
And I'm Caitlin. I'm also a program manager on the Xbox Gaming Accessibility team, and my background is actually working as an occupational therapist, so getting to work with players with a wide range of disabilities as well.
In this video, we're going to be taking a deep dive look at the Xbox Adaptive Controller's 3.5mm ports and the buttons that can be plugged into these ports to create your customized gaming setup. Specifically in this video, we will discuss the 19 ports on the back of the controller and how to use them, and how some of the ports have different functionality than the others. We'll also talk about the various types of buttons that work with the Adaptive Controller and where you can find them.
Using external buttons.
So first, let's talk about the ports on the back of the controller. As we mentioned, there are 19 of them, and they all use the same 3.5mm connection type. When you're setting up your adaptive controller, it's important to note that there are two ways to determine what a port does. The first way is out of the box. You can actually create your setup by looking at the labels below each of the ports to tell what their function is. So for example, this port is labeled X. So if I wanted this button to be my X button in the game or when using my controller, I can simply plug it into the X port. And through plug and play, that button will now function as X. You can also use the Xbox Accessories app to change what a port does and further customize your setup through software remapping. But don't worry, we will cover all of the details of how to use that app in our Xbox Accessories app remapping deep dive video.
So now that we've talked about the ports themselves, let's talk about all the different types of buttons that can be used with the adaptive controller. When it comes to button compatibility or making sure that the buttons you purchase will work with your adaptive controller, the main thing to ensure is that the button has the 3.5mm jack type. The 3.5mm is pretty standard in the world of assistive technology. So for anyone that currently uses these types of buttons for things like switch access on phones, computers, or communication devices, as long as those buttons have the same 3.5mm type, you can most likely use it with the adaptive controller for your gaming setup as well. If you don't already own buttons like this, that's okay. Next, we'll talk about the various types of buttons that are out there and where you can purchase them.
So first, let's talk in general about just the various types of buttons that are out there. You can find links to any of the buttons that we'll mention in this video on our resource page. So for many players who cannot access all of the buttons on a controller with their hands, they may use other body parts to activate buttons that control their game. And we've seen so many awesome setups where players are using their head or their chin, their elbows, knees, and feet and more to activate buttons on their gaming setup. So what the adaptive controller does is it really allows players to place buttons where they have the movement, the strength, or the coordination needed to activate their button during the gameplay. So when it comes to some of the simple press to activate buttons, there are quite a few options for these as well. And it's important to note that these buttons can come in a wide range of shapes and sizes. Buttons that are, only a few centimeters wide, to those that are similar to the size of a tennis ball, and even ones that are as large as a small dinner plate. So for players who might be using larger body parts or might have difficulty hitting some of those smaller button targets, many of these larger button options could be really great.
But there are also very small or light buttons for players who prefer to keep all their controls nearby in a smaller, more confined space, or if they want to use small movements to activate their buttons. Another aspect of this to think about when choosing buttons for your setup is activation force, or how much strength it requires to actually press the button. There's a huge range of possible activation forces that buttons require. There are even light touch switches that require very little activation force, and even ones that all you have to do is graze it with the body part that you're using, like a finger, like when you're tapping a phone screen. So when choosing buttons that can be activated by physical press, it's important to think about the shape, the size, the amount of force needed to actually activate the button, and it will all depend on your individual needs and preferences.
And while there are a lot of options for buttons that, again, can be physically pressed with any body part, there are also other button form factors to be aware of, especially for players who might be using their mouth, for example, to do the majority of their gaming. So some of these options include things like a bite switch, where essentially when you bite down on the switch, it will send that control to the game in the same way that pressing down a standard button would. There's also options like sip and puff controls, where basically sipping on the straw might activate one button press, and then puffing into it will be a totally different button. So these are really great for players who, again, might be using their mouth or their head movement alone when creating their setup, but are looking to play some of those games that do have more complex controls and require quite a few buttons in order to play through. And there are even button options available that require no physical activation at all. So buttons that are motion activated, where simply moving over the button will actually activate it. So again, there's a lot of options out there to meet the wide range of customization that's possible when working with your controller. And we've provided that list of links for where to find each of these buttons in our resource.
It's also important to note that there are two overall types of buttons: analog buttons and digital buttons. Digital buttons send a simple on or off signal, just like when you press the A button and it tells your character to jump. On a standard controller, the face buttons and the bumpers are digital. Analog buttons can send a range of values. Think of this like a throttle in a racing game. You'll get more throttle the more you activate the analog button. On a standard controller, the right and left triggers are analog. Similarly, you can find external 3.5 millimeter buttons that send either basic, digital, on or off input, or if you're someone who's interested in game genres that use throttle or range type inputs, such as giving a car gas in a racing game, you can be sure to purchase buttons that send those ranged analog type inputs. If you're planning on using analog buttons, it's important to note that only 4 of the adaptive controller's 19 ports will support that analog type of input. So to make sure when you're trying to use the analog button types, you're using the right type of ports and you're plugging the button into those ports. Those ports are RT, LT, X1, and X2. While it's not required to use analog buttons for these ports or these games, it's an option that's available to you. Otherwise, simple digital buttons can work for any type of input.
So I know we just went over a lot of information, and now you might be wondering, where can I get started? Where can I find these buttons? So let's talk about some of the main options outside of our resource links. First, you can also check out our Design for Xbox Accessories site. And here you'll find some really awesome options like the Logitech Adaptive Gaming Kit, which comes with 12 buttons total. Some are digital, including a few of these larger circular-shaped buttons, a few of these smaller circular-shaped buttons, as well as some of these lighter touch oblong-shaped buttons. And then as Adam mentioned, you'll also get 2 of these variable trigger buttons that are great for things like racing games. And as we mentioned, the 3.5 millimeter connection type is really commonly used in the assistive technology industry. So simply looking online for assistive technology switch buttons is also likely to produce a lot of great options. There's also a lot of fantastic maker groups and nonprofit organizations and other folks in the assistive technology industry who are creating their own low-cost buttons, either through 3D printing or other technologies, so be sure to look out for those as well. And if you're a maker yourself, you can also check out our online input specification for makers, and this will outline everything you need to know to create your own buttons that will work with the adaptive controller. So again, to get started, please check out our button resource links, and you'll find a comprehensive list of where to find many of these buttons, as well as some of those other online resources we mentioned. And this way you can get a true overview of what's out there and choose what will work best for you.